Mason is 1 month old today, and we thought it was a good time to give our birth story with him, and then also we can't really give his without giving our daughter Lydia's birth story also. So we'll start with Lydia. She is 3.5, so pre-pandemic baby, just right before the pandemic. November of 2019, is when I delivered Lydia. Scheduled C-section. And during my pregnancy, I kind of just had this feeling like something was maybe wrong. And then also we had I had some weird things going on. One of the things being, it felt like Lydia was having a seizure in utero. And we found out later that she wasn't having a seizure, but it was, that is kind of what was happening. So, sorry, buddy. Can you see? He's been a little bit cranky, so we're gonna see how well he does with us. But she in utero, it felt like she was having seizures. It kind of felt like an earthquake was happening in my abdomen, is the best way I can describe it. And so I told my OB, and they did kind of their due diligence and did ultrasounds and all that kind of stuff. And everything came back normal. She was growing well. Everything was great. The only other big thing that was wrong is that she was breech. And so we ended up having to schedule a C-section. He's squirmy. Ended up having to schedule a C-section on November 5th, 2019. And we went in, really, it was a good day. We went in at 4 o'clock on November 5th, and C-section went great. It was 7 minutes long.
Fast, yeah.
It was fast. I remember they put I was really nervous about getting the epidural because I wasn't really in pain at that point. I wasn't in labor, and so I was mostly nervous about getting the epidural and having, the hiccups. So I was mostly nervous about getting the epidural and worried that it would hurt, and it really didn't. Someone held my hand the whole time, and bless you.
Because as the spouse, you don't get to be in there. So there I am sitting in a big empty, waiting area where there was no other, patients or staff or anything, all by myself. So that was an interesting, probably 15 minutes of just kind of sitting around in full scrub, waiting to be told I could come in. So Lydia was born shortly after that via C-section. We got to basically spend the next 4 hours to 4 to 6 hours kind of with her, with family, and then probably shortly after family all left was when something was wrong, and we didn't really know. A nurse was changing her diaper, helping us with that, and then she just kind of wheeled her away and said, I'll be right back. And we didn't know what the heck was going on. And we didn't think anything was wrong because, everything post-birth had been smooth. So, so then shortly after they took her away, they came back and said that they needed to take her to the NICU in that hospital. And then, so her, Lydia and I went to the NICU. There was all kinds of doctors and nurses coming in and out trying to figure out what was wrong. And they couldn't really give us any answers, and that was when they told us they needed to take her to the nearby Children's Mercy Hospital. And so she was then taken by ambulance in a little incubator. And that was when I realized that you can't just sit in the back of a ambulance. I had to sit in the front seat and make small talk with the driver of the ambulance. Meanwhile, I don't know what the heck's going on with my daughter.
Sorry to interrupt. But during that time is when the NICU doctors came back after Lydia left to talk to me. And I asked, what was going on, and they said, we don't really know. And they said they thought she was having seizures, and they said, unfortunately, newborn babies don't have seizures. It's not an epileptic seizure, so it's not a normal seizure. It would be if she was really sick. And so if she is that sick right now, 4 hours after birth, and like no complications with delivery, I asked like what the likelihood was that she would survive, and they said it was not likely. So we weren't sure. I at that point didn't think I was going to see her again, which was really tough. And I don't think I told you about that, obviously. Yeah. I mean, I was kind of a disaster. I was kind of sad. And I was by myself because Corey and Lydia were gone. All of our family was gone. I then called my mom, and my mom came up around midnight. But it was a long time to be by myself at that point.
Yep.
And I still had the epidural in, so I couldn't move. I think around midnight I had them take it out so that I could
recover quicker.
Yeah, so that I could get out of there and go see sweet Lydia. But yeah, what were you gonna say?
No, just that, you know, to make kind of a long story short, we went through probably 3 different stays at Children's Mercy because they couldn't identify what the problem was, and it really took, you know, somebody who was extremely knowledgeable about her rare genetic disability to identify it, like just by being around her. So we went through the gamut of blood work and various tests that they ran at Children's Mercy to no luck until basically the 3rd stint that we were there because of a couple of different instances where she had stopped breathing because of her episodes. We kept having to go back to Children's Mercy. They finally identified what her genetic kind of what they thought what her genetic disorder was, and then they proceeded to do blood work and confirm that. So we both carry the gene. Weirdly, there's very few people on Earth, from what I understand, that carry it, and we happen to be 2 of them. So yeah, it was in 1 in 4 chance essentially that we would have a child with it, and then obviously that's kind of what leads to Mason. And in some respects, we had a lot of conversations while we were dating about potentially seeking adoption at one point in our marriage, and I think the understanding and going through what we went through with Lydia, and particularly, you know, your postpartum journey, was what led us to ultimately kind of really decide to pursue it, probably more than just talking about it, right? So
yeah. And I want to talk a little bit more about like the NICU and my postpartum journey. So just because I think it's not something that I would have known. Yeah. Or like, you know, didn't think was going to happen to me because I had a healthy baby. So I was able to leave after a C-section. Typically it's three nights. And so since I think it would have been 3 nights because I delivered so late in the day on that Tuesday. And so I was supposed to stay until I think Wednesday. Yeah. Or Thursday. Yeah. No, Friday. I would have been discharged on Friday normally, but I got to leave on Thursday morning, basically because I forced them to. But my doctor for safety wanted me to stay 2 nights, especially because the first night I still had the epidural most of the night. So I was able, typically they leave that in, I think 24 hours after you deliver via C-section. But for me, they took it out after about 12. So it must have been like 4 a.m. when they took it out. They took that out. About an hour later, I went to the bathroom and got up with help, walked to the bathroom, was able to empty my bladder. And then from there, my recovery in the hospital was pretty straightforward. I pumped a lot, so they gave me a pump in the hospital and taught me how to use it. The lactation consultant did. And then they gave me like a little swatch, and like Lydia had the same fabric at the NICU where she was at, and then I had the other half of that swatch that I like held while I pumped. But it was kind of, to me, it felt a little bit silly because it didn't really even smell like her yet because she wasn't She wasn't alive long enough. So, but I did hold it and like look at pictures that Corey had sent, and that helped my milk supply come in. But it did take longer than normal to have my milk supply come in, and they said that's pretty normal when baby goes to the NICU. So I kind of just like worked on getting mobile, and well, he does not like to stop eating. I worked on getting up and moving as quickly as I could, and that really helped with my recovery. I did use a wheelchair. The mistake I made at the NICU is that I used a wheelchair when I got there to get to the NICU. But then while we were in the NICU, that was the only time I used the wheelchair. And so I think that delayed my recovery physically a little bit. So I think I just was more worried about what was going on with her than I was worried about me. So then when we were home, and I was just kind of like doing a little bit too much. So physically I did okay, but just kind of definitely took my pain medication as needed and that kind of stuff. Mentally, it was really tough, just not knowing what was going on with her. She really struggled with eating, with breastfeeding, and that was really hard mentally on me. I didn't really know at the time who to go to about postpartum depression and anxiety. I was screened, and they told me I did have postpartum depression, but then no one ever really followed up with me. I didn't get any recommendations for counselors or medication or anything like that. So looking back, I think I would have pursued that more, but I think in the moment I just didn't have the capacity or ability to like really think that through myself. So you live and learn, but that's just to tell you guys something to pay attention to, especially if you have a sick kid. Don't forget to take care of yourself. So because then I think after about a year or 8 to 9 months, I ended up going to therapy because I was definitely not getting better, and she was. So then based on like my kind of postpartum like mental health, physical health, and just the fact that we both carry that gene, they basically gave us 2 options: genetic, IVF, or adoption if we didn't want to risk having another child with hyperexplexia. I think the other thing that we talked about was just that we don't really know how severe Lydia's case is. It could be because it's so rare. She's the only one in Kansas City that we know of, but because it's so rare, they don't have like a spectrum of like how severe her case is. And a lot of cases of SIDS are linked to this disorder, which is called hyperexplexia. And so just based on all of those things, we just really didn't know. And she was having those episodes in utero. The gene that we both carry that Lydia has is the only gene linked to hyperexplexia that also is associated with the apnea or stopping breathing. So there was just several things that kind of, plus like Corey said, we had already talked about adoption, and that was kind of our first choice if we struggled with fertility issues at all. We were like, that's the route we wanted to take. And so it just kind of felt like we were really being pointed in that direction. And so, so then by the time, and then we went to couples therapy together to kind of like talk through that decision, talk through Lydia's process, or like kind of like what we went through together with Lydia. And then kind of, so I felt like we really, it wasn't like a quick or easy decision.
No, and I think after, the first 6 to 8 months with Lydia, we knew that we needed to like care for her differently than maybe other kids would need cared for, and a little more attention. And so that just kind of meant that we knew we needed to wait a little bit before we introduced another kid to the family. And it was almost probably like a year ago or maybe a year and a half ago where we started to think her abilities have gotten a lot better in her day-to-day. And so we just felt like it was finally time that she could kind of be a lot more independent than maybe she could have been before. And so that allowed for us to be able to kind of bring another member into the family and not necessarily need as much one-on-one attention.
Yep. And so we started the process, so it's 2023. We started the process like January 2022
Yep.
is when we
That's
started.
kind of when we made the commitment to get the ball rolling.
Yeah. We chose our agency. We used American Adoptions as our agency, and we loved the whole experience. They've been really supportive. They've just got a really organized and straightforward process in place, so it's really there's no like second guessing or like it just feels really like there's always someone emails you back within the same business day. It's pretty straightforward, and they really care for the birth moms, which a lot of agencies we were looking at, we're the ones like pursuing and paying for, to be frank, the whole adoption process. And so a lot of agencies are focused on the adoptive parents, which is great, and you obviously need that. But we really found that American Adoptions was focused on supporting the birth mom, not only during this process, but for the rest of her life and like the child's life. So that was really important to us when we picked an agency. And then in November, just having Lydia and having a business, it probably took us longer than it needed to.
And we
do
definitely,
paperwork.
we definitely didn't.
We didn't push it. We
didn't force ourselves to sit down every weekend to work on it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, there's a lot of steps. Like we had to get a home study, background checks. It just seemed like you would finish one thing and then you'd get emailed like, here's your next step. And then, if you're interested in that process, you can email them and they'll send you like a whole packet of information. But it was a lot of outlined steps, and it just kind of took us until November, Thanksgiving. I think it was almost Thanksgiving when we went live, essentially. And so part of that going live process is they make you a video profile and then a print profile. A lot of people are familiar with books, but American Adoptions does it a little bit differently, where we typed up essay responses to a bunch of different questions, and then they made like a little brochure essentially of our family. And both the print and the video profile go to the birth moms. So when they come to American Adoptions looking for adoptive parents, the agency essentially does like a matching process. So we filled out our preferences, and then on like what we're willing to accept, I guess, and like what we want.
They ask, all kinds of different questions, from drug use to race, ethnicity that you're comfortable with, to obviously whether you want to adopt an older child or a newborn.
Yep.
So, and plenty more.
Yeah. And so we were pretty open in that, which I do think helped, but obviously we got a Caucasian little boy, which is amazing. But anyway, we can go, if you have specific questions, you can always email me. But we've had a few friends who have adopted through the same agency, and so we were able to call them and kind of like talk through that process with them and kind of help. They helped us a lot with like choosing preferences and things like that. But we got all that submitted. So anyway, when the birth mom comes to the agency, we've already submitted our preferences. They have their situation, and so when they come to the agency says these are the, let's say there's 100 adoptive parents that match with that birth mom. They only get presented with 5 at a time, and then they can always, if they're like, we don't necessarily jive with any of these families, then the next 5 would be presented until they choose a family.
And the agency has an algorithm essentially to make sure that everybody is shared evenly, that not one couple is shared every time, or that it's essentially the algorithm helps them decide whose turn it is to be shared to prospective mothers. Yeah.
So then in end of March, we got a call about Mason, and they told us that they had a birth mom who's looking for adoptive parents, and that she was due April 29th. So we had think like 6 or 7 weeks.
Yep.
To prepare, essentially. And we had 24 hours to decide if we were going to like accept the match. Obviously, we accepted it pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I will preface that with that the agency kind of told us during the pandemic, especially, that it could take 1 to 2 years. I think pre-pandemic and maybe now a little bit more post-pandemic, the turnaround time might be closer to a year. We did set our preferences pretty open on most categories, and so that I think allowed for us to be shown in those pools of matching birth, mother, family history, race, everything a little bit more. And so that may have helped in the long run for us to get chosen a little bit quicker than maybe what they expected. But they also set those timelines probably pretty aggressively, so that folks don't get their hopes up. But maybe there are cases where it does take a lot longer.
We're just really cute, so popular. No,
so humble.
Mostly humble.
Yeah.
No. So we Mason's birth mom saw our profile and chose us, which was super humbling. As much as I joke about that, but it was really humbling to receive the call and just hear kind of about her and why she was choosing adoption for Mason, and we kind of feel like that's her story, but she's young and just felt like he would grow up in a wanted him to grow up in a loving home.
Yeah, and I think every birth mom situation is different. This one, there's no telling what necessarily her true motivations were, but I think she found herself to be young and not with the birth father, and so and not probably financially stable to be able to care as a single parent. Not to say that others can't, right? Some people are perfectly capable, or at least they do what they can. But
I think one thing that, not that we've struggled with it all, but just one thing that we have been humbled by is just that she definitely could have made it work, and she made a really brave decision to just do what she thought was best, which is so hard as a parent, to do things, to choose that like selflessness of like what's best for your kid and maybe not what's necessarily best for you. So she made that choice, and we got to text with her quite a bit during that 6 weeks. We tried to talk quite a bit. So we chatted with her quite a bit, just kind of like got to know her, sent her videos of Lydia and us and pictures, and just kind of like tried to let her into our family a little bit. And then, this is getting long, but then
it was due April 29th, but we couldn't just leave. We had work, we had Lydia, we couldn't just leave and just kind of be there waiting, and so we just waited and come to find out that she needed to be induced. So she was induced about 5 days or 3-4 days later, something like that.
Yeah, May 1st.
Than her due date. And so we ended up driving up there the day before her induction to be there for the birth. And so we spent, the night before just kind of settling into an Airbnb, got to the hospital in the morning she was induced, and then proceeded to wait for several hours in the lobby before the hospital graciously kind of gave us a room to hang out in. And then we spent probably about 10-hour stretch of hanging out in the hospital room, just kind of waiting for Mason to be born. And then about 1 a.m. he was born.
1:11 a.m. he was born.
So
on May 2nd, and we had like amazing nurses and hospital staff the whole time we were in the hospital, which I think was a huge help in like letting everything going so smoothly at the hospital. But in Ohio, we had to the birth mom has to wait 72 hours before she can sign over permanent guardianship to us, and then So on Friday, so we had to stay in the hospital until Friday. So we were in the hospital. We got there Monday morning, and then we could come in, or one of us could come and go, but one of us had to stay with Mason, obviously. But so we could come and go. But I pretty much stayed at the hospital. I think I left like a couple times. One time to shower, and then one time to just take a little walk.
Yep.
And then we finally found the hospital cafeteria too, so that was helpful. But spent a lot of time in a hospital room. It was pretty. We got used to the same four walls and got to know the hospital staff pretty well. And she did sign over temporary guardianship after about, I think, 24 hours. Can't really remember timing, but she signed over temporary guardianship. So then we could make medical decisions for him. And then on Friday morning, she was able to sign over permanent guardianship to us. And that was just kind of a really emotional.
Birth mother and birth father.
Yeah, birth mother and birth father, which was really special that they got to do that together, and really was like a huge humbling experience for us, that they both chose us. So it was just kind of an emotional day. It was a lot of like sadness and happiness at the same time. So Lydia was able to come up with my mom on Friday afternoon. So her and my mom flew to Ohio, and then we all stayed in a really tiny Airbnb together, and that was fun. And we just kind of like lived at the Airbnb, and we went to the park down the street a couple times. Oh, buddy. It was nice to be able to be together and kind of be in like a little bubble. I think because I wasn't postpartum, I felt really good. So when we got home, we were kind of like go, back to our normal routine, going to people's houses, obviously not going in big crowds, but just kind of like on the go a little bit more. And so I kind of, it was nice to have those like few days in Ohio. Hindsight is 2020 though. While we were in Ohio at the Airbnb, it was torture because we were just waiting for approval to leave. Yep. So once the permanent guardianship paperwork got turned into the state, then the state has to basically approve it, and then they tell us we can go home. So that happened on Tuesday afternoon. So
basically a week after he was born.
Yeah, 1 week after he was born, we got word that we could go home, and then we left Wednesday morning super early in the morning, and then drove 13 hours back to Kansas City with a newborn and a 3.5-year-old.
Yep.
So my mom had left on Monday morning. My mom left Monday morning. So it was good timing because we were a little bit nervous on what we were going to do without her. So we got home okay. Mason did awesome in the car. Lydia did awesome in the car. And then I think that's it.
And now he's a month old. And
we're doing well.
Surviving.
Yeah. There's definitely been still some like triggers for me. Just being like in the newborn phase from last time, but it's a lot better anxiety and depression wise. Just I feel good. He's doing well. It's just a totally different experience. So yeah. Thank you for listening. I know this was not short, but if you have any questions, we're definitely open to talking about it. We'd love to share with you. Any questions on having a medically complex kiddo or adoption, we are open. So thank you.